NeuroFlow, brought to you by the Neurodiversity Ambassadors. NeuroFlow aims to foster caring for the neurodiverse, create a welcoming society for all, and celebrate neurodiversity. Each episode, we will host a new guest speaker diving into their thoughts on neurodiversity and the neurodiverse experience. I'm your host, Vienna Lee.
And I'm your host, Nina Park. Today's guest is Austin Lee, founder of the Bernards Ensemble, a local nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading the joy of music to the elderly and neurodiverse. Austin, would you like to give a short introduction?
Yeah, sure. I'm Austin. I'm currently a rising junior at Columbia University, and I'm studying political science and sustainable development. And I started the Bernards Ensemble in 2016. In the summer, to be exact. And, at first it was just my friends, a group of my friends who play instrument and I, who wanted to hold like little recitals for, people with disabilities. The organization is still going on now. I'm really happy to see it thrive, and we are still hosting a lot of concerts and spreading awareness about neurodiversity.
That's great. So let's get started with our first question. Can you briefly describe what neurodiversity means to you and why it is important to encourage and have appreciation to those who are neurodivergent?
Yeah, sure. So as someone who works extensively with the neurodiverse community, neurodiversity itself really holds like profound meaning for me. First, it really acknowledges that each individual's brain functions very uniquely. And there's like not one like normal or, quote unquote, like typical way of thinking or like processing different emotions and information. To me, neurodiversity isn't really, like a concept or a label. It's more of like a representation of this like principle of diversity in humans where, neurological differences such as, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, are like very valuable variations, rather than deficits, for humans' brains. And I think it's very meaningful because it really, highlights how neurodiverse people have their own strengths and talents and unique perspectives on a variety of different things that can really enrich our society and contribute to its well-being. And the other part of the question was like, why? Sorry, can you repeat the other part, please?
Yeah, sure. Why is it important to encourage appreciation and acceptance to those who are neurodivergent?
Right. Okay. So I feel like, if we embrace neurodiversity, we could, we're far easily able to foster a more inclusive and compassionate society as a whole. And, just for the individuals themselves, just supporting and showing support for neurodiversity would, really help to enhance their self-esteem and their well-being and, really empower them to embrace their identity and really like bring out their talents. Just overall just foster like a positive, sense of like self-worth. And, I truly believe that, encouraging more appreciation of like neurodiversity really goes like hand in hand with like advocating for the rights and the needs of the neurodiverse community, which I personally feel like is really lacking. And as more and more people begin to like appreciate and become more informed about neurodiversity, then, it could hopefully pave a way for an environment where, their voices are heard and their rights are respected and upheld.
Going back to the idea that neurodiversity is not deficit, but instead a variety or a diversity, what are some common misconceptions or stereotypes concerning those who are neurodivergent that you believe need to be disproven?
I feel like there's a wide range of different misconceptions, especially, that's being proliferated around society right now. Like for instance, a lot of people who may not be as knowledgeable about neurodiversity may think that it's just like a monolith almost. It exists as a monolith, but in fact, like neurodiversity really encompasses a wide range of different conditions and cognitive differences. And just assuming that like all neurodivergent individuals like share the same traits or experiences really overlooks the uniqueness, and like the unique characteristics and different challenges that each neurodiverse individual may face. And another common one is, a lot of people think because the neurodiverse community, like, they may not think like us or like, think as like neurotypical people, they aren't capable of like success or like having the independence that we have. But this kind of thought process, I feel like really undermines the ability and, the actual potential of these people. And many people who have like neurodivergent conditions lead very like fulfilling lives, which a lot of people are not, aware of. And, with the right support system and right accommodations, which a lot of like different local organizations are working hard to provide, they could really achieve their goals. And let's see, I guess another one is like a more social aspect where, a lot of people tend to believe that, neurodiverse people or specifically, people with autism, like they lack social skills or like interest in just like forming relationships, but that's really not the case. Especially, even from elementary school, I've been working with a lot of children with autism, and in the exterior, like they might be like very cold or not really, warm to the idea of forming friendships. But the more you get to know them and like with the right kind of support that you give them, they really like start to show that, although they may experience a variety of like social challenges, they really don't have a lack in interest in like connecting with others and forming relationships, with others. And a lot of, individuals with autism, they value, like social connections and friendships. It's just, we have to keep looking, for the right way to communicate with them. And, just want to go back to the Bernards Ensemble point. Our entire mission is to communicate with these people through music. So we would hold like musical recitals, and, just open the floor to questions. Like, there's a lot of individuals who have questions about the different instruments we play or like the different pieces we play. And, this organization is just like the tip of the iceberg, basically, in, trying to achieve like very, strong, connection with, the neurodiverse community. And finally, I would think, that a lot of people assume, or, very more on the prejudice side, but like, a lot of people tend to think that, neurodivergent people are ultimately a burden on society. But, I feel like this really devalues, the contributions and, like I said, the potential and the talents of neurodivergent people. And, in reality, when they're given the right channel to express themselves, they could bring their unique talents and perspectives and innovations to a variety of different fields, which, as a whole, just, benefits society.
Those are some excellent points, and it's really fascinating to see how you have created such a welcoming and positive and collaborative environment for the neurodiverse. I'm sure here at our organization, also highlighting the stigma against the neurodivergent is something that we want to focus on. And so transitioning to our next question, could you provide a personal experience or perhaps a story that exemplifies the difficulties or successes you have faced working with the neurodivergent community?
Sure. So, wait, sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so if you have any personal experiences or stories that show your difficulties or perhaps your successes?
Yeah, so I guess if we kind of go back all the way to like 2016, so I'll answer the question, but I also do want to give a little bit of a backstory. So I was in South Korea at the time, like in the summer of 2016, and I was given the chance to like perform music or perform on my violin along with another friend who helped establish the organization. His name's Sean Lee. And we were given the opportunity to play at an orphanage for children with a gamut of different like disabilities. And it's very sad that like South Korea as a whole is like very still closed-minded on the concept of neurodiversity, and it's very stigmatized, which is why there's dozens of different orphanages for children with for neurodiverse children. And we went and we played music for them, and there was there were children who were like very intently watching and listening to us and like reacting to the music, but there was also a lot of children and like young adults who seemed like they were very interested in the music, but like they weren't like very engaged, and a lot of like the aides at the orphanages would try to get them to like sit up straight or like to like not like wave their hands around, and at the time I didn't really understand, but like now I know like a lot of different like neurodiverse people have very like various ways of expressing themselves, but I guess a big challenge for me was like I really wanted to try to communicate with them and like open them up through music, but it felt like there was like a lot of challenges involved. And when I came back to the States, I was talking to my friend Sean, and like we decided like maybe like let's try something similar like locally, which is why we formed the Bernards Ensemble. And we were just like brainstorming like ways that maybe we could better engage like our audience, like the neurodiverse. And one of the ideas that we had, and after talking to my mentor who works at the Arc of Somerset, who's an occupational therapist by trade, but she works a lot with people with neurodiversity, she suggested like maybe like we try to introduce different elements during our performance that could really like help the audience members like feel a little more comfortable and be a lot more like interested in the thing we're trying to do. So which is why like we devised a way where we would set up like different projectors and like play different video clips that correlate to the music that we're playing. So like for example, if we're playing some music from like Disney, then we would like put Disney stuff, and thankfully it wasn't like copyrighted or anything, but and we found out that like through like a visual medium, a lot more people were engaged with our music, and they were a lot more receptive to like talking with us after concerts, and like they'd be coming up to ask questions, and they would want to try some of the instruments. And we decided to like take it a step further, like in a lot of our like earlier concerts, like we'd also do like little like Q&A sessions like in the middle of a concert, or like we'd have like little presentations, like verbal like presentations, oral presentations about our instruments, how the instruments make different sounds, and we'd bring in like demonstration instruments so that like the people could actually try it and have a more hands-on experience. So I feel like through all of this, we first faced like difficulty in trying to find the right way to connect with these people, but then a lot of trial and error and a lot of different explorations of different mediums really helped us to realize that it was definitely an eye-opening moment for us when we realized like not all of these people like it's not the same, where like if there's a video, then everybody's going to be engaged. Like we need different ways to communicate with them. And like just a lot of like experimentation and a lot of different, concerts and recitals, later. And like, I feel like we've really implemented a really, effective way to communicate with these people and, to really help them out.
It is fascinating how you went through so many trial and errors to finally find the best for every neurodiverse person watching your concerts. Moving on to the impacts that can do as individuals. What can individuals and large society do, in your opinion, to foster an environment that is more welcoming and supportive of neurodivergent people?
Okay. So individuals and like, maybe I could mention like society in general. So, as somebody who's kind of been in, working with this community for a while, and actually like, I was lucky enough to do some volunteering and internship work with the ARC, a couple of years ago. And just me observing, different things, like I noticed that I feel like, the first thing, the easiest thing I think we can try to do is to provide like very sensory friendly spaces, for these individuals, because a lot of neurodiverse individuals, especially, people with autism, they may be like very sensitive to light or like to different sounds, noise, and they might get like sensory overload and then they might shut down. So, just being able to create a space that is more welcoming for neurodiverse people, I feel like would be a very easy step towards, trying to accommodate the neurodiverse community. And being a little more welcoming for them. I guess, I'm really proud of you guys for doing neurodiversity ambassadors, because I truly think that like bringing awareness to the idea of neurodiversity and raising awareness. Backtrack. So bringing awareness and also like educating the public. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, educating the public about neurodiversity is really important. Because, we talked about before, there's a lot of different misconceptions that people have. Honestly, as long as they're not like super close-minded, like a lot, just like a presentation or like a little lecture, on like neurodiversity, or like an Instagram post like you guys do, could really go a long way with, changing people's perspectives on what neurodiversity actually means and what it entails. I guess more on like a broader scale, I think we as a society should be pushing a little bit more for like inclusivity in education. I feel like thankfully in our school district, and I know in William Manning and Ridge and even, our elementary school, there's like different programs specifically meant for children, neurodiverse children. We're lucky to have, and our community is very lucky to have those kind of systems in place. But other places, that may not be as fortunate as us, do not have access to like the same resources. And I just feel like, as a society, we should be pushing, for more of this, more inclusive practices and more inclusive programs for, kids who may learn in a different way to us. I guess, I was really interested in, especially in high school, I was really interested in like public health policy, specifically like policy involving, the neurodivergent community. And a lot of like research that I did regarding these policies had to do with, like better policies that ensure that, there's a more robust like mental health, system in place, and like therapy in place for these individuals. and more like pushing towards like anti-discrimination efforts, and that even counts like maybe people who are on wheelchairs, and accessibility is a really big issue. And actually it was kind of going off topic here, but one of the concerts for Bernards Ensemble, and I think one of our biggest mistakes, I think, was like earlier on when we were holding a concert, we picked a venue and it was really nice, except we completely forgot the fact that it was like not very accessible and there were no ramps or anything. So there was a lot of like children who were in wheelchairs who wanted to come and see us, except there was no way they could because they couldn't get up the stairs. And, we really learned from that. And I feel like that had a very profound effect on me and really made me, while I'm just walking, and like looking at different buildings, like thinking about like, oh, is this, accessible for people who are in like wheelchairs, or accessible for people, with like, different disabilities. And, I may be thinking that, but like there's like a whole bunch of other people who may not really like have experienced something that I have, right? And they might be a little naive to that. And, I feel like a little more awareness, towards like anti-discrimination, like physically and, I guess socially, I think it's really important, for us to, really foster a more welcoming community for these, for the neurodiverse. And something, that I noticed, is so, in media, right? A lot of different people consume media, like whether that be movies or like different TV shows. And, these different types of media have a profound impact on us. And I feel like normalizing neurodiversity in media is a very important step that I feel like we still have to take. Because even like shows these days, like I don't know if you guys heard of this show called The Good Doctor, but it's a show about a doctor who has autism, and it kind of documents his life. Except that show has been receiving a lot of backlash because of the way that autism has been portrayed. Like the doctor is seen as very cold and like very antisocial and like very argumentative at times. And that all like sets a very bad, like, what's the word? It leaves a very poor, poor impression of people who have autism. When in fact, they're not like that at all. But, this kind of media, and then, I know certain clips went viral before, on different social media. And now like that image, of like the doctor with, autism is now imprinted on like everyone's mind. And that really, like you said, a bad impression. And we should be doing a lot more, to promote, and show like the good sides of like neurodiversity in different types of media. And like, that could start from like hiring like people within the neurodiverse community to like be a consultant on the show and like kind of get their advice on like, oh, how should we depict certain things? And like, I just feel like, there's like, these are like the little things that would as a whole be able to help us be a little more welcoming to, people who have neurodiversity, or people who are neurodiverse. Yeah.
Those are some excellent points that you mentioned, and especially at our organization, we do want to foster that collaborative and welcoming atmosphere for those neurodiverse. And as you've mentioned, the portrayal of the neurodivergent on social media is definitely some aspects that we can keep in mind. And as I also believe that even having this conversation is definitely a big step into creating this more collaborative environment. And as you mentioned, the small things like accessibility, these are things that like people don't normally think about, But the fact that you've mentioned it and that we are having this conversation, I think is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And now going back to, I believe you mentioned some research that you have done. Have you come across any organizations or perhaps resources that have been particularly valuable in terms of advocacy or education for the neurodivergent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of research, I tended to use a lot of like peer-reviewed studies, especially, I think the National Health Institute has a lot of great resources, pertaining to, well, specifically I was focusing on like autism in some of the research that I was doing. But I'm sure it has a lot of different resources, great resources on other, types of, neurodiversity. But, I could speak on some like organizations, that definitely, do a lot for the neurodiverse community. I mentioned before, my mentor, Karen Kowalski, she works at an organization called the Arc of Somerset, and the Arc of Somerset is just like one chapter of the overarching ARC organization. And the ARC, at least the one in Somerset and all over New Jersey, they actually offer adults with disabilities a chance to do work and get paid, and also do rehabilitation. During that, and sorry, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. And as a whole, the organization itself, the big organization, pushes really hard. It's a nonprofit, but they really push hard, to advocate for rights and the inclusion of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Which obviously, includes autism and other neurodivergent conditions. So the ARC was really a great way for me to really be able to interact with adults who have disabilities. And I also know the ARC also does a bunch of summer camps for children who have developmental disabilities. And they have a lot of special activities just tailored to them. And I think it really has left a positive impact for the community as a whole. And I speak about the ARC so in depth because it has a really special place in my heart, since they were the ones who really helped me to understand what neurodiversity really means and to really get the Bernards Ensemble up and running. And I know there's other organizations called, there's one called the Autism Self-Advocacy Network. I think it's, ASAN. And there's the Autistic Woman and Non-Binary Network, which, it's not just solely focused on the neurodiverse community, but they do a lot of good work, especially for women who have autism. These organizations all are very, very helpful for not only helping the public be more educated, but also just directly helping the neurodiverse, whether that be getting the appropriate care that they need, or helping them obtain jobs, and helping them, reintegrate into society a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
And I think I know a lot of people like to talk about Autism Speaks when they talk about organizations, but I personally am not a fan of Autism Speaks because of the various controversies they've had, and so I wouldn't really advocate for Autism Speaks. But the other organizations that I mentioned are really, really great places, great organizations, and great resources.
It's fascinating how our society has come this far and how neurodiversity has raised or gained so much awareness since like the recent past. And thank you so much for all of your great insights so far. With our podcast, we ourselves learned so much from what you're doing and your thoughts about the neurodiverse community. And I'm sure the listeners of this podcast think the same too. Before we close the podcast, is there anything else you would like to share or discuss about neurodiversity that we haven't covered so far?
I guess, a lot of people who aren't as familiar with neurodiversity, do like to ask, like, what can I do? What can, like, we as, like, individuals do to be better allies, right? And, like, better advocates for the neurodiverse community. And, there's a couple things that I do like to tell them, and, it's something that I hope, like, the listeners of a podcast will also be able to remember. But, I think personally, like, I feel like if we practice more empathy and, like, more active listening, I feel like that's a really, really big part in becoming, better advocates for this community. And I feel like if we just seek to understand the experiences and the perspectives and, like, the very diverse perspectives of, like, the neurodivergent individuals, then we'll be able to gain a lot more empathy and really be able to understand what they're going through. And a lot of, like, the personal stories that I've heard from, like, people from the neurodivergent people, really, it personally really helped me to understand, their day-to-day struggles, or, their successes, or like the different things they like to do and, like, the things they hope to do. And that just really drives me to be a even more impactful advocate for neurodiversity, the neurodiverse community, and as well as, like, advocating for better rights and, like, different policies. And I think another big thing that we can we as a society can start doing better is, like, using a little more, like, inclusive language. I know that there's, like, a variety of different words that may be used in a derogatory manner, which really, like, hurts, like, the neurodiverse people. And just being more mindful of the language and, like, avoiding, like, very stigmatizing terms would, I think, be able to promote, like, a more respectful, like, environment. And and the last thing, I guess, is I feel like we do have a lot of power in, like, advocating for certain practices or different like policies, and just, like, advocating for, like, inclusive practices in schools, like, workplaces, and, like, different communities, and, like, advocating for, like, policies to protect the rights and also, like, to support the needs of neurodivergent individuals, I think will go a long way.
Those are some excellent remarks, and once again, I just want to thank you for joining us today. It was really a pleasure and honor talking and learning from you. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Neuroflow.